立法會主席。
The President. Government Bill. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Appropriation Bill 2020. This meeting is the second budget meeting. In the relevant circular to all members, the clerk to the Legislative Council has reminded members that only members may speak in the second reading debate to be held today and tomorrow, and the debate will continue next Wednesday, that is the 29th of April, when the third budget meeting, at which only public officers will respond to members' views, will be held. If the motion for second reading is passed, this Council will forthwith go into Committee of the Whole Council to consider the bill. Today's debate will end at about 7 p.m. Tomorrow's debate will start at 9 a.m. I remind members that the actual speaking order of members is decided in accordance with the order in which they have pressed the request to speak button. As such, members who wish to speak today will please press the request to speak button as early as possible. Under the rules of procedure, each member may speak for up to 15 minutes. Mr. Chen Chen-ying. Mr. President, I would like to speak on 4 areas. First of all, the crisis we found ourselves in. In the year 2019, we were sort of affected by internal strife as well as external elements. We have had a negative economic growth. We have an economic downturn, and our internal demand has suffered in the light of the U.S.-China trade conflict. Quite unlike previous economic downturns, we have been affected by the social events. As a result, our economic performance was hard hit. Given the global uncertainties, we are suffering from new challenges. I think the U.S.-China trade dialogue will get more difficult, and this is going to inhibit the economic growth in Hong Kong. And we, in the month of January, started to be affected by the COVID-19 virus. And so retail, catering, transport, among other sectors, have had a hard time. And then starting in March, the crisis became more and more serious in the Western world. And in fact, I'm afraid the repercussions will spread throughout the world, and Hong Kong cannot stay out of it. Now, for street violence, yes, we have seen a ease, but it hasn't been eradicated. The society is much divided, and it is difficult to see a recovery. The internal strife is not to be resolved soon. There is a lot of difficulties for our governance. It is difficult to implement measures that we want to introduce. So both the internal and external factors in the crisis are difficult to tackle. It is not easy to have a recovery. I think we must have the counter-cyclical measures. In the past, whenever we had an unemployment situation, we were able to recover in 6 months' time. Now in March, we are having a 4.2% in terms of unemployment, coming up from 2.8% in June last year. So we need to have more stimulus packages. Well, we are in a chilly winter in terms of our economic outlook, and there are turbulences. The FS have come up with this budget so as to ease the livelihood difficulties, support employment, and support the enterprises. I think I want to say that I support the budget. Well, we are having a $120 billion package. It was expected that we were going to have a $139.1 billion deficit. But then we are going to get the money brought back from the housing reserve as well as other sources. In fact, it would be a matter of $180 billion deficit. I can see the will of the government to tackle the problem. We can compare ourselves with Singapore. In fact, $260 billion more will be offered so as to help enterprises, households, and individuals. I think that's what the Singaporean government is going to do. And it is 11% of their GDP. And in fact, when the crisis deepened, Singapore had another $27 billion more packages so as to subsidize all the employees. 75% of the pay of the employees were subsidized. Employers were urged not to grant no pay leave and not to make employees redundant. Now, the crisis is global in nature. And in fact, in the case of the USA, they are having a $2 trillion package, and they have cash payout so as to help the people, so as to minimize the economic impact. For February and April, we have had 2 rounds of anti-epidemic fund requests so as to help the sectors as well as the individuals. Taken together with the $120 billion under the budget, altogether we are talking about $290 billion. This is the same as 10% of our GDP last year. The FS told us frankly that we are going to have $280 or even $300 billion in terms of our deficit. It is said that it's going to be a record. For the anti-cyclical or counter-cyclical measures, I think the government is helping the society, like paying for the public rentals, etc. They're nothing new. I think the most direct subsidy is in the form of the $10 cash payout. But then how are we going to get it? Well, I'm not sure. In the year 2011, we got $6,000, and then in year 2016, we were given $4,000 in the form of cash payouts. In fact, we have a very easy to operate payment system. The government should make good use of its existing infrastructure, like paying the cash to the CSSA households, etc. Now, the government has rejected the idea in the past, saying that it's a matter of privacy concern. Now, later on, we were told that has gone out of that has been addressed, and now it is a matter of having to deal with the systems. But then we have the faster payment system, etc. I think we can make good use of such a arrangement so as to make sure that the money will go quickly to the pockets of the people. We should learn from past experience. We should get more professional advice. We should make sure that bureaucracy will be abandoned. We shouldn't allow excuses to prevail, and we mustn't allow ourselves to suffer from low-grade errors. My third area is about the need to develop our economy. Mitigatory measures are necessary, but at the same time, we need to take our economy forward. The epidemic is going to have long-lasting impacts on the society throughout the world. We have good fundamentals, but then if we are able to come up with timely measures in a crisis, it will be good. If not, the middle class as well as everyone in the society will have the resilience being weakened. The FS has said that our core competitiveness has not been changed. Yes, the mainland is taking up measures so as to open up the economy and develop its market. In other words, Hong Kong businessmen have more opportunities to take part in the economic development. And we would like to become a regional hub for services and professional services. We have the Belt and Road Initiative, we have the Greater Bay Area developments, and I understand that there will be mutual connection between the financial services markets. There will be a lot of opportunities for us to develop, but then for us to sustain our economic development, we can't just rely on what I have referred to. In particular, currently, many businessmen do not see any new drivers of our economic development so as to bring in an economic recovery. We've been trying hard to find new sources of income, like reindustrialization, etc. Well, in fact, I understand that a lot of innovation technology infrastructural projects have been proposed. I'm fully behind this. I think the epidemic is going to change the mode of operation in the business world forever. I think more technology will be adopted, like mobile office, video conferencing, and also online exhibition and sales. And then for this global epidemic, it means that everybody would give priority to public health, technology, and the fight against epidemic will present new opportunities for the business. Well, we have the mobile robots to measure body temperature, 3D printing for facial shields, etc., would present new opportunities. Of course, my heart is close to the financial services industry. I would like to refer to paragraph 24 of the budget. I'm afraid the funding has been halved, and then the scope is narrow, but then the measures are more specific. The securities market, green bonds, retail investment, wealth management, etc., are all being covered. Like the stamp duty for ETF market makers will be waived, with the I-bonds, the silver bonds, the annuities will also be sort of given a favorable treatment. I think all the policy measures are good, and it means that we have a lot of opportunities in the area of wealth management. But then, according to some research reports, both in the UK and Shenzhen, well, in fact, we have seen a major change in the ranking of the financial services centers. New York and London are still ranking top. Tokyo became third, and then Shanghai has risen from the fifth to the fourth rank and place, and then Singapore is fifth, and Hong Kong has fallen by 3 places to the sixth. So we are not in among the top 3, irrespective of the reasons behind such a fall. I think we need to address the problem, in particular for infrastructural projects and for our pace of development of our financial services industry. We need to catch up, otherwise we will always be kept out of the first 3 places. I think the government should exercise greater fiscal discipline. Now, Basic Law 107 has said that we need to make sure that we try to make sure that we have the following discipline being followed. That is, we shall follow the principle of keeping expenditure within the limits of revenues and drawing up the budget, strive to achieve a fiscal balance, avoid deficits, and keep the budget commensurate with the growth rate of our GDP. I don't think using our own money to salvage the livelihood would not meet with any objection. Even Singapore has used its reserves to help the people. I think we need to be proactive. I don't think we should avoid having massive fiscal deficit. We save the money for rainy days, but then we need to make sure that we address the problem in the medium term so that we can restore the fiscal balance in the medium range. Now, I understand that the government has come up with many ideas. They are not recurrent in nature. The public should understand that they would not be made regular. In other words, they would not be regarded and should not be regarded as long-term commitments. The reserves will come down to about $800 billion. It is said that this may affect our credit ranking. We have been given a downward adjustment in relation to credit rating recently. But I think we have always been well placed in terms of our ranking. Fiscal reserves would be one of the many factors affecting our ranking. On other fronts, we have had sound fundamentals, like we have a low public debt, and we have surplus, and we have the exchange fund, etc. All such parameters are being challenged. Of course, we are in crisis, but then the mere changes in the fiscal reserves would not affect our credit rating. Of course, I don't think we should allow the deficit to become the norm. The government should review the fiscal structure, and we should try to see what other measures can be introduced to develop more or to introduce more revenue sources. In fact, we are too reliant on land-related income, and they will be volatile. We need to have new sources of income, and then we should avoid having so many one-off concessionary packages. The FS has said that for the OECD, it is now considering the low tax rate rules. Hong Kong may be affected. For our Inland Revenue Ordinance, we have had 44 years without any major overhaul of the ordinance. In order to take on the challenges presented by the global rule changes, I think the government should review the ordinance so as to make sure that our attractiveness in terms of our tax regime will be maintained and thus keeping our competitiveness. Now, we have such a poor business outlook. I think it is understandable and we need to support the budget measures so as to mitigate the problems. But then we need to make sure that with the passage of the request to have the anti-epidemic fund, the FS will lead the team to make sure that all the measures will be implemented so as to benefit the public early. Well, the epidemic has affected every one of us, and it has gone beyond the scope covered by the budget. We have had 2 more rounds of the anti-epidemic fund. I think the government should act decisively, and when it is time to do so, please come up with more concessionary measures so as to help us to ride out the difficulties. Thank you.
Ms. Alvin Yang. In this vast chamber, we only see a couple of government officials. The financial secretary and Mr. John Lee, the only other secretary present, are the only officials weathering the reshuffle. Did the reshuffle mean that certain officials had to be held responsible? The only thing I know is that the relevant officials never apologized to Hong Kong people, while those who have to be held accountable are still here. For example, Mr. John Lee. Today we are examining the Appropriation Bill 2020, and this is an express provision in the Basic Law. Last week, when the Finance Committee scrutinized the second round of measures under the Anti-Epidemic Fund, certain agencies said that people who vote against the proposal had to pay for it. If anyone goes against the $600 billion budget, then what is the price they have to pay? For members who press the veto button, would they be accused of breaking the oath or misconduct in public office? By the same logic, for past budgets or appropriation bills, resolutions would be moved by members to reduce items they found not appropriate. So for those who move amendments or resolutions, would they have to pay? As for the LegCo president, such as yourself, who endorses those resolutions or motions, would they have to pay as well? President, you can rest easy. There are express provisions under Basic Law Article 50 that if consensus still cannot be reached after consultations, the Chief Executive may dissolve the Legislative Council. This is an express provision, and this would save the troubles of certain people trying to interpret the provisions. The Legislative Council has the right to refuse to pass a budget. Ms. Alvin Yang. Ms. Alvin Yang. Please come back to the theme. I'm just discussing or explaining the reasons for us to vote against the motion or the second reading debate. How we proceed to the vote or decide on the vote are internal matters of the Legislative Council, and we are not subject to commentaries from any other parties. In terms of the expenditure in the budget, first of all, the expenditure of the Hong Kong police force, we are talking about a disciplined force who serve with dignity and honor. Their budget is $25.8 billion. Is it worth it? From what happened in Hong Kong in the past year, I'm sure Hong Kongers have the answer already. Yesterday, I found that the Hong Kong police force were great at making money. What happened in Yuen Long last night? Members of the public and young people were accused of breaching the provision against gatherings order, and they were slapped a fine of $2,000 each, and a lot of revenue went into the Treasury last year. Hong Kong people would also question the establishment of the police force in the coming year. Together with directorate staff, it will expand to 38,481 persons. If we divide $25.8 billion by that number, the average expenditure per staff member is $670,000. Of course, for total governance, defending sovereignty of the country is important, so the bill is certainly worth it. But this is the Legislative Council of Hong Kong. No checks and balances could be provided on the police. We are even giving them a greater budget to hire 2,500 extra staff, and $130 million would be spent on water cannons, and these new weapons would be used against Hong Kong people. Even if Hong Kong people feel that the $25.8 billion is not warranted, even if our resolution managed to shave the police budget to zero, they can still enjoy whatever equipment they want, and they can do whatever they want. And the Public Finance Ordinance allows the signing of appropriation orders to transfer funds between different departments. The amounts of the transfers and the number of transfers per year were not information to be reported to LegCo. Myself and Mr. Jeremy Lam asked a question about the appropriation order. The Bureau did not answer the questions, and when we followed up, they asked us to consult the Security Bureau. And eventually, the Security Bureau said they had to consult the FSTB before they could give an answer. So why was that the case? When the Security Bureau provided a reply, they said the police obtained $230 million from 22 different government departments, and they said the $230 million were spent by the police on behalf of other departments, which was a very interesting logic. It is akin to someone who took out a loan refusing to repay the loans because he's simply spending the money on their behalf. Based on the current popularity of the government, I'm sure the government would, or the public would want to trace how every dollar is spent. So the financial antic of appropriation order should be subject to oversight by LegCo. That way, LegCo can fulfill the obligations under Article 73 of the Basic Law. As for the $10,000 cash payout scheme, when the FS announced his budget in February, between then and the time when the cash handout or cash payout is given out, there should have been a lot of applause. But very soon after most Hong Kong people would wake up, because they would wake up to the reality that they might not get the money before next year. So why are Hong Kong people still complaining despite the many benefits? Of course, they remember the lesson from the $4,000 payout at the Legislative Council. Even the loyalists asked whether the $70 billion budget should be isolated for separate treatment, scrutiny, and voting at the Finance Committee so that the cash can be dispersed as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the Financial Secretary and the government as a whole were not interested in listening at all. The $10,000 cash payout should have helped Hong Kong people, so speed is of great importance. There was an obvious path, but you refused to accept it. Why did you have to wait till the Appropriation Bill? This is unfathomable. The government's responsibility is to spend its surplus or revenue on the people of Hong Kong. And in the form of a cash payout, people can spend the money freely. Apart from helping themselves, some Hong Kong people would want to contribute to businesses with the same principles. President, even if the $10,000 is some kind of redemption for the government to compensate for their faults or some form of apology, but by the time cash is handed out, it will not have any redemption value anymore. Only Mr. John Lee is here, and everyone knows how popular he is. During the epidemic, it is certainly a good idea for the government to return wealth to the people, but the government should think about its own problems. Would any officials, including the chief executive, be bold enough to voice out against interference in internal matters? So for civil servants who breach the laws, would you cut ties with them? While for higher officials, would they enjoy a great career through shoe shining? And just now, Mr. Ronick Chan talked about a lot of in-depth issues, for example, how public money should be spent. But what is more important is the question, who does the money belong? The money belongs to Hong Kong people, so we should consider how the money should be spent. With the changing global economies and the decline in credit ratings for Hong Kong, the SAR government is playing victim. If Hong Kong's ratings improve again in the future, we can see all the government officials embracing the situation again. They would accept praises, and blame would always be shifted. So I like to quote from a TV commercial in 2012. The commercial showed a group of young people and a martial arts master, and one of his students asked whether the basic law would apply to martial arts. We are in April 2020, this is a question of many Hong Kong people. As LegCo members, they might think that the basic law still applies, including the rights we are entitled to and our right to vote against the budget. This is certainly a right we are entitled to, and this is it is within our right to vote against the proposal. On behalf of the Civic Party, I speak against the Appropriation Bill 2020. Thank you.
Professor Joseph Lee, President, this year's budget was issued amidst a great time of volatility. And we were concerned about the cash payout of $10,000. I wonder whether Mr. Alvin Young was happy or not. But anyway, we were happy that finally we had some cash payout. But then as the epidemic developed, then we found that there are problems with the budget. And we even wonder whether we could hold a meeting as scheduled today. Of course, we are having the meeting today. But the question is, the epidemic has been here for 3 months. Would the budget be able to help address the economic, social, healthcare problems arising from the epidemic? So today there is a good opportunity for us to take a look at the situation. We've got the $10,000 cash payout. We have to weigh how it is going to be dispersed. Now, for the 3 months of outbreak, the hardest hit is not just the business sector and those who will be relieved by the anti-epidemic fund, but then for the public healthcare system and the private healthcare system are hardest hit. Now, the budget, I don't see anything measured addressing the problems of these sectors. This is disappointing. Now, we've got the hardware needed during the epidemic. So we are lacking isolation center, hospital beds, and PPE is inadequate. So how can we fight this battle? We hope that there will not be the epidemic, but, well, we are worried about what's going to happen next year. So should we be reviewing the budget to see whether more resources can be committed to help the sector? And then, can the budget really address the problems in the healthcare sector, especially the deep-seated conflicts? This is something of our concern. Now, let's take a look at the budget. It says that there will be enhancing of the services, then a large sum of money will be devoted for building hospitals and new teaching facilities. This is not something new. The secretary is not here. He has stepped out. He should take a look. These are not brand new initiatives. Now, these are proposals that have been there. It's just that they are put in the budget this time. So that doesn't help. And then we talk about retaining the healthcare staff. Of course, we're happy about that. The Nursing Association and myself have been discussing and raising various proposals on retaining healthcare staff. So there are 3 options floated. As far as nurses are concerned, the policy addressed that we will provide additional allowance to registered nurses. Of course, in the past 10 years, we've been saying that specialist registered nurses have helped in enhancing our service, and they should be helped. So we've got another register or accreditation system for them. But should there be additional allowance or bonus for them? Of course, that's good. It's set out in the budget. But then the HA said that there will be fixed amount allowance. But we've been asking that an additional points be added to their salary, but this is not addressed. So are they not doing a proper job? They are just coming up with a fixed amount. So be it $2,000 or what? So what about inflation? So how can we do that? Can you really retain nursing staff? I don't know. But let's not forget, well, staff come with experience. We are short-handed, and we are losing the experienced nurses. So should we be looking at the shortage of manpower here? And some people have been telling me that they are going to emigrate. They are the nurses. So we are losing all sorts of experience among the nurses. So should we consider whether we should consider a 16.5% allowance so that the nurses can stay, so they can work happily in the HA and they won't consider leaving. And then we also have an incremental point system. The paper set out that if we've got 10 salary points, and then we would say be taking away 2 among the 10, and then people can rise among the 8 points. So this is not being done. So the sector has been saying that we should revisit these initiatives so that we can retain nurses to serve Hong Kong people in the midst of the epidemic, and also progression. The secretary said that we would be adding in an extra grade. We're not setting up new posts. Well, we have the ward manager and also the registered nurses. And between the 2 ranks, there will be an additional grade to be added. But then only a small salary increase comes with that additional grade. So can you really retain staff by doing that? No. We need to open new posts. And we also have to retain people with the clinical experience. They've never done that. And the nurses are very unhappy in the midst of the epidemic. The HA doesn't have enough PPE, and then sometimes the people carrying the virus are allowed to come into Hong Kong, so we're unhappy. And you're not even willing to do that to retain staff. Yeah, well, what you propose is an old proposal, and you've not responded to our requests. And then the epidemic, the fight against the epidemic also exposes one flaw as well. You see that there is maladministration in the HA. Well, what do we mean by high risk, low risk? So who will be given allowance and who will not? So they are in a chaos. How come that the ward, those working in the high-risk wards are not given an allowance, while those who are working in other wards are given an allowance? So can the budget really help them to also clarify all these issues? You said that you've given the HA money, the anti-epidemic fund has given HA money, but then it doesn't seem to be effective, and the morale seems to be low. And then there was a survey saying that 75% think that the HA is not giving enough PPE, and 90% thinks that for the clinical infection control guidelines don't work, don't protect people. So they are worried. And 90% said for the second-tier protection and ventilation system comes with a problem. So are the patients safe? Are the frontline staff safe working there? And if for staff morale on a scale of 0 to 10, it comes with only 4 to 5. And the pressure was ranked 7 to 8 marks. So is the budget addressing all these gaps exposed by the epidemic, and also PPP? Well, the secretary is not here. You talk about the dual-track system. But then the private sector has been ignored this time. Now, so can private hospitals do some triage? And the HA is not working on non-urgent cases. GOPC is not tackling them. So can patients of these types of diseases be transferred or diverted to private hospitals for treatment? You do have the money. I'm not asking you to help the private hospitals. It's just that they should be asked to help provide certain services. Of course, private hospitals will not take on patients with infections. Now, OTs, PTs, optometrists, and nutritionists in the community can help out also do a gatekeeping role. You've got the social distancing measures, so the patient should be asked to go elsewhere. And they don't have enough PPE, so they can't work. So can the budget help? So can we foster the PPP, public partnership? This is not clear. And for primary care is even more laughable. You've given some $600 million to the sector. I've been raising suggestions about this on primary health care. And for the DHC, District Health Center, I think it's prevention is better than cure. You should at least teach people how to observe personal hygiene. Well, these centers have closed down, and ultimately, subsequently, they've been reopened. They said that they would use Zoom. Is that effective? Can you give them more money so that they can strengthen their gatekeeping role in primary healthcare? I don't think that is being done. And some studies show that 98% of Hong Kong people are having mental stress because of the epidemic. Well, not to mention that the political incidents are also causing them stress. So what can we do to help them? A lot of respondents are showing symptoms of anxiety, but the budget doesn't say anything about protecting mental health of Hong Kong people. We have the anti-extradition protests and the epidemic following that. So there are a lot of mental problems to be tackled. The budget fails to address these. There is a long queue. Now, for adolescents and children's psychiatric services, service demand is increasing continuously. But then we are also just adding 100 people to the sector, to the service, and it can't catch up with the demand. This is most disappointing. Can we have one school, one psychiatric nurse? Can we strengthen mental services, health services in the community? And what about the increasing number of case managers in community mental nurses team? So that's not being done. So I will not be dwelling on the details of this service. The FS, your proposals in the budget cannot resolve the deep-seated conflicts that I mentioned. Hardware, software, manpower, and in primary care, there are problems which are not addressed. The budget doesn't say anything about that. I'm going to talk about the elderly. You can see that there has been some increase in the resources. But let's not forget, there are some 10,000 elderly waiting for the community healthcare vouchers. They have to wait for 1 year to get the vouchers. Well, you want people to age at home, but then people can't. Have to wait a long time for home care services. So maybe some people have to deliver the meals to the elderly's home. Well, during the epidemic, they still have to do that, and we appreciate their efforts. But then there is a group of people waiting for such services still. You said that we do have such services, but then some NGOs have been telling us that even if you give us the money, but then we don't have the manpower. So can we guarantee the service quality of community care service? You're not just, you should not be adding the number of places. We should be mindful about the manpower, say the nurses, allied healthcare staff, and social workers. You have to provide more support in those regards. And then in the community, there are a lot of elderly who are healthy, and they can have dim sum at restaurants. And they've been waiting for a long time for DHC, and on average, the waiting time is 23 months. What are they doing there? Exercising, receiving health checkups, attending nurses' seminars on staying healthy, so that their degeneration can be slowed down and they can age at home. But then they have to wait for a long time. I've been saying this to the DH. They said that they have adding in places, but the budget doesn't say anything about this. It's not just about building an extra center. We need manpower, and you are not doing that. And the budget also says that $75 million will be provided to provide soft meals for elderly. But why do they have to take soft meals? So what is the difference between one soft meal and another? So speech therapists have to come in to help to do some swallowing tests, or else the elderly will end up with having pneumonia. And speech therapists have told us that right now is one speech therapist has to attend to 1,000 elderly. $75 million is set aside for providing soft meals, but you haven't looked into the cause of the problem. Now, I've been saying this also for several years. We are talking about the audio testing, audio assistance services. One third of those aged over 65 have problems with hearing. And after 2015, no study has been undertaken on elderly's hearing problems. The latest survey on the information on hand in 2015, 76% of the elderly had a hearing problem, but we have got more elderly these days. The latest surveys finds that in 2016, one audiologist have to take care of 37,000 elderly. We're just better off, a little bit better off than African countries. So if elderly can't hear, they have social interaction problems. So all these is very unsatisfactory. And also the pharmacists, the community farmers program is a good one, but then it has stopped after 10 years of implementation.
Mr. Riley, Mr. President, we have been facing the double whammy of social unrest and the epidemic. Now, all businesses have been affected, and we are in a plight. I think we need to make use of public finance measures so as to boost the economy, support the employment, and safeguard the enterprises. I think for this budget, it is good because it will help us to ride out the storms. Well, we have seen something unprecedented. For those aged 18 or above, as long as you are a permanent resident, you get a $10,000 cash payout. We've got measures to support enterprises and safeguard jobs. The AB's requests have been met with. We have the $10,000 cash payout. There are also concessions on rates, profits tax, salaries tax, and then for CSSA and among other payments, we are getting a month more. And then candidates' exam fees have also been waived. The business registration fees have been waived. Reduced. And then water charges, you get a subsidy amounting to 4 months. So all such measures will help the enterprises and individuals to survive the storm. So the DAB is going to support the budget. For the budget and different rounds of relief measures, they are in the right direction. But it doesn't mean that they are perfect. In fact, there is still room for improvement. The reality is that the riot as well as the epidemic are causing a lot of difficulties to us. Many people crying out for help. They badly need instant relief from the government. Yes, we have got different rounds of relief measures, but then day in, day out, we are getting calls from grassroots citizens. They have lost their jobs, they don't have the means of living. They are saying that the measures are either too slow or they are not comprehensive enough. They have been missed out. So let me urge the SARG, the CE, all the directors of bureaus and the secretaries of departments to be humble and listen to the voice of the people. Don't just because of bureaucracy and the existence of a number of rounds of relief measures become complacent. I would like to focus on 3 points. First of all, the cash payout scheme. FS, I'm afraid is still too slow, not responsive enough. I think you have responded to the calls to have a cash payout. It's good to have $10,000, but when are we getting it? This is very crucial. Many citizens would regard this amount of money as money needed in rainy days. We have registration in June, distribution in July. For those who have been hard hit, in fact, we are already seeing difficulties affecting them. Such a pace would be too slow. So time and again, we ask the government to be quick and streamline the procedures. We should make use of the existing payment systems to expedite the progress. For the Social Welfare Department, there are people who are getting OAA, OH living allowance, student grants, etc., including CSSA, etc., as well as people who benefited in the last round of payout under the CCF. So make good use of this infrastructure. And then instead of asking them to register, just give them $10,000 directly and disregard all the privacy concerns. For this group of people, 1 million of them, they're the grassroots, they can benefit early, and we can focus our resources on others who do not already have an account with the government. I think it is good. I have made this proposal to Dr. Luo Zhigong at this FC meeting, but he has already thrown out my idea. FS, please respond to my request. Second, for round 2 of the AEF, In relation to the employment support scheme, I think the requirements are too unrealistic. Now, of course, first of all, you need to have contributed to the MPF. Many workers are aged 65 or above. They are not covered by the MPF. Cleansing workers, security guards, transport workers are commonly in lack of a MPF account. For others, even though they have got an account as a result of the social unrest and the epidemic in the past few months, they have had a cut in their income and they have not been contributing to the MPF. They don't meet your requirements and yet they're the grassroots, they really need our help. So FS, please try to relax the requirements a bit. We have already endorsed the $130 billion package. Do relax the requirements so that they can benefit. And then we must come up with an unemployment relief subsidy scheme. Well, you're talking about safeguarding jobs, supporting enterprises. We agree with such a direction, but that doesn't mean that with that you can sort of turn a blind eye to those who are out of a job. Some of them have lost their jobs, they are underemployed, and the figures yesterday told us that for the first quarter, the unemployment rate is 4.2%, an increase of 0.5%, a 9-year high. We have over 2 million people who are unemployed, and then we have got an increase by 0.8% in relation to underemployment rate up to 2.1%. Many sectors have been hard hit. And then for the catering industry, it is 6.8% in relation to their job loss rate. I'm afraid it has yet to peak, and it's the highest since 2009. Well, many people called us. They have lost the means of living. They are not yet eligible for CSSA. So we do need to have an unemployment relief scheme to cover such people. Yes, the budget has got many measures, but what about instant relief to this group of unemployed? Mr. President, I think we had the social unrest last year, and then we have the epidemic this year. So many people are in deep trouble. Well, there are households who have lost the means of living as a result of the epidemic. The DAB has taken the initiative to help, and our lawmakers have donated $3 million, and then we raised another $100, a total of $4 million, and we had a cash relief scheme. In as short as 30 days' time, we received 1,400 applications. We try our best to vet the applications. We try our best to help them, each household getting $2,000 to $5,000. 695 applications were vetted and approved, and before the 7th of this month, they got the money. And for the second round, they are getting the relief from us as well. FS, yes, there are many well-meaning schemes mobilized by the community, but please make sure that you don't forget the unemployed or underemployed grassroots citizens. Please set up an unemployment relief scheme, and please try to expedite and streamline the administrative procedures so that you can hand out at least, say, 3 months relief to them, and no less than $6,000 a month. And you should also cover the underemployed and people getting no pay leave. I think it is like trying to put out a fire. We can no longer put up with the bureaucracy. You have to deregulate and show your courage to have commitment towards us. Yes, the budget has got a sort of innovative idea. People aged 18 or above will get a $10,000 cash payout. So for the short term, it is an acceptable budget. Well, in fact, we have the social unrest and we have the epidemic, and this is the first budget since the two challenges. Other than the instant relief measures, we want the budget to be forward-looking. You need to stimulate the economy. We need to have a visionary budget. Now, everybody has been caught surprise. caught by surprise by the epidemic. FS, you have said that we need to look at 3 points. First of all, we have been rocked by the epidemic and the supply chain has broken. And second, consumption sentiments and behavior have been changed. And then social interaction has been much reduced. Person-to-person communication in terms of retail sales has gone. More and more focus is on online shopping. In fact, on 4, and you have already pointed out that social distancing has been stepped up and transport has slowed, and therefore global trade has been weakened. It is said that foreign direct investment will be much affected. It will be down by a substantial amount. Well, the consumption sentiments will remain at a low level. All sorts of industries will be affected. The demand will be scaled down. And then for construction, etc., we are told that the work will not be resumed soon. But then we have got telemedicine, we have got online learning, we have got online shopping, all such are new business opportunities. In fact, we can see that for us in Hong Kong, many catering enterprises have changed to online shopping, and they are having takeaway being ordered online. So have you spotted the new opportunities? Maybe by going online, we have a lower demand for office spaces, and more people are having bookings being done via online platforms, and Zoom is prevailing. So will that affect many other businesses? Are we going to make good use of the new horizon, the new landscape, so that we can recover post-epidemic? I think you need to take the lead, and it is rightly in your court. We can't just hold fast to free economy and let the market revive the economy on its own. I don't think we can embrace such a philosophy in the future. So FS, please think out of the box. Please make sure that you show leadership so that we can stimulate and recover the economy after the epidemic. Well, in fact, even before the epidemic struck us, we have had difficulties, all because of the radical violence. It is a matter of I burn, you burn with us mentality. Now, in fact, the economy was already in a very poor shape, and the epidemic has added to the troubles. In fact, it is like exposing all the weaknesses in Hong Kong. It is like a mirror that shows up all the weaknesses. Now, our economy is not broad-based enough. Our income is income distribution is unequal, and we are aware of all the difficult issues that we face. But then the anti-extradition bill has shown up the deep-seated problems. We must address them. Otherwise, it is difficult to put them under control. For the budget, I'm afraid nothing has been said about addressing the deep-seated conflicts. We don't see the government having the will and commitment to deal with such deep-seated conflicts and take up the challenges. For the budget, yes, FS, you try to respond to the public call to have cash payout, $10,000. But then you are just following the 2016 format of giving out $6,000. We've already said that you need to give the money to the elderly and to the people who have an account with the government first. Please reconsider my idea. In the year 2011, while you were representing the accountancy sector, you did ask for a task force to be set up to look at our tax regime so as to enhance our competitiveness as a business center and address the question of wealth inequality. Now, in fact, in 2017, you set up a working group on tax reform. You first mooted the idea 9 years ago. Now you are the FS. You are well placed to implement what you have proposed in the past. So I urge you to implement what you have preached. Well, in less than a year's time, we have had the social turbulences and violence arising from the protests against the extradition bill. And in fact, for months, we have had riots. And in fact, the society has been much polarized. Governance has been challenged. And it has also exposed all the weaknesses and inadequacies in our government, in our society. Before we can see any respite, we are hit by the epidemic. And this is a public health risk. And our economy has been sort of thrown into deep troubles. You need to take the lead so as to stimulate the economy of Hong Kong and relaunch Hong Kong after the epidemic. Well, Mr. President, I think it's time for us to undergo a major operation in terms of the future of Hong Kong so as to address the deep-seated conflict so that we have a fair society in the future.
Ms. Claudia Mo. Thank you, President. Starry Lee spoke defiantly. She was reading from her speech. Apparently, she sounded like they were the ruling party. This stance of cooperation between the executive and legislature has been very obvious. We managed to stem the extradition law amendment bill. Look at how many government officials there are in the chamber. Even for officials who were fired, they were simply sacrificed. They were sending the wrong signal that they are doing something in an attempt to stem the anger of Hong Kong people. For a real patriot, you are not doing enough. You are not showing the gravitas expected by Beijing. For the officials with the lowest popularity ratings, their places are still very safe. So the so-called retribution or musical chairs are not something people should believe. The long hair of our equity market criticized the government as well as the financial secretary. The FS was labeled economically illiterate, so he should reflect upon himself. Today, we are discussing or debating the Appropriation Bill 2020. I think using the word debate is laughable. What kind of debate this is? Beijing has always said they enjoy total supervision over Hong Kong. Back in 2014, there was a white paper on Hong Kong. They talked about total supervision, and the liaison office of the CPG said they could issue directions anytime. So has the budget been approved or blessed by Beijing? Did they remind you how it should be modified? Did you correct the budget as expected? So what is the point of us having a debate? So whatever the loyalists say, they would be granted. We must give ample resources to the police force, and you would say, yes, boss, we agree. So you are squeezing resources out of certain departments for the benefit of some other departments. The loyalists were rubber stamps, to be polite. They are simply here to press a button. If they abstain, or vote against an item they would have to pay, which is a scary proposition. There's no way they would upset their boss. They are giving vast resources to the police. The budget will swell to $25.8 billion. You might say this is not much. This is an increase of 25%. Which government department or official would enjoy a 25% pay rise? They knew that this might be problematic for the responsible official who was labeled economically illiterate, came up with an offsetting arrangement in the form of a $10,000 cash payout. And that is people which belong to Hong Kong people at the first place. They are injecting this $10,000 payout into the budget, and hopefully this would balance things out, and people would be less angry. This is a if we burn, you burn with us mentality. Some people are saying that Hong Kong people shouldn't adopt this mentality, and the so-called yellow ribbon economy is not feasible. It is skewing the market. The responsible officials responsible for commerce and economic development simply don't get it. In the market, the economy, the consumer makes the calls. I think you are the one embracing this mentality, and they are not distinguishing the right from the wrong. Ronick Chan said he talked about the credit ratings or rankings in terms of economy, but he never talked about international investor confidence. One of Hong Kong's strengths is freedom of information or press freedom. Did you read the report from the Reporters Without Borders report? Hong Kong's ranking dropped 7 places. We now rank 80th in the world. We are lower. We are lower than many countries in which people cannot even spell the names. China's mainland China's ranking is 177th, which is 4th last. Yes, Hong Kong is part of China, but why do rating agencies rank Hong Kong separately? The reason is one country, two systems. Hong Kong has a special status, but this is no longer the case. When you talk about the budget, of course, Hong Kong people have no say. You can do whatever you want. You can give resources to whoever you want. You might say that LegCo is now providing oversight and offering criticisms. You are being hypocritic. The loyalists have enough votes anyway, so they would support the budget no matter what. And you could be putting up a show by making minor criticisms or saying that there's room for improvement. This is hypocritic. Our fiscal reserves might drop to $800 billion. What about the East Lantau reclamation? What about the artificial islands? It would cost more than $1,000 billion, and it will go ahead. This is appalling. In terms of livelihood issues, the pro-democracy party, especially members who care especially about welfare issues, we have shown sincere concern compared with many loyalists. Carrie Lam said if Hong Kong, if the legislature is dominated by the pro-democracy camp, what would happen? I would say that we would have a greater future. Thank you.
Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Thank you, President. Earlier, there was a lot of violence on the society, and the violent acts have not ceased, and then we have the COVID-19 epidemic. We are have double whammy, and Mrs. Carrie Lam and Mr. Paul Chan have set aside large amounts of public money to launch 2 rounds of the anti-epidemic fund. And in the budget, a raft of measures were launched to support enterprises and relieve people's burden and to help tide over the difficulties of people. $80 billion will be used to support employment, and so wage subsidy will be given to employees subject to a ceiling of $9,000, and this will last for 6 months. And because of the epidemic, a lot of businesses are seeing a reduction in their business hours, and employees have asked for to take no pay leave, and so this is very common. A lot of employees are seeing a reduction in their monthly wage. So I'm very concerned about the second round of the anti-epidemic fund. The employment support scheme is premised on the giving out wages calculated on the basis of the wages from January or March. So would this go far enough? A lot of people are paid on a basic commission plus a basic salary plus a commission. Now, since the outbreak, the commission has dropped drastically in the amount. So the help isn't enough. So there will be the policies will not be effective in that case. So the administration must pay attention. So $70 billion will be set aside to give a $10,000 cash payout to those over 18. So a total amount of $290 billion will be used as relief, close to 10% of the GDP. So FS, you are rolling out a lot of relief measures involving a substantial amount, and we are seeing a reduction in the income. So the budget deficit will be $300 billion, an unprecedented high, and fiscal reserve will be reduced from $1.1 trillion to $800 to $900 billion, equivalent to 13 to 14 months of government expenditure. Undeniably, the government has been sitting on a fat fiscal reserve, but then the businesses are now in dire straits and using huge amounts of money to help people to tide over the difficulties is much to be welcomed and supported. However, we hope that, or we request the government to launch these relief measures ASAP, and if needed, consider one very critical issue, and that is after the epidemic is over, how can you help the economy rebound so that the SAR government will not be plunged into a persistent crisis of a structural budget deficit. Now, since the handover in 1997, the government has been abiding by the Article 107 of the Basic Law, and that is the budget should be a balanced one, and we should avoid deficits. Now, apart from the current financial year, a deficit was only seen in 2003 when SARS happened in Hong Kong. At that time, the SAR government has seen a deficit 2 years in a row back then. Now, during the SARS period, the Hong Kong was hard hit. After the SARS epidemic was over, the SAR government has launched a CEPA and individuals travelers scheme for Hong Kong. Hong Kong's economy had rebounded V-shape, and the SAR government has also gone out of the budget deficit. But now we are seeing the COVID-19 epidemic. After it is over, will Hong Kong be in position to rebound quickly? In the latter half of last year, because of the anti-extradition protests, there were a lot of violent clashes, including robbery and other illegal acts. And the rioters were engaged in a lot of violent acts, and the society was in turmoil. Hong Kong, as a safe and society with the rule of law, is tarnished, and a lot of travelers are deterred from coming to Hong Kong. We are a city which can't even protect people's safety. So how can we attract travelers to here to consume? And we are not protecting private property rights as well. So how can we ask investors to come and do business and invest? So when the epidemic is over, we must relaunch the economy, and the precondition is that we must stop all violence so that we can restore our law and order situation. Now, to do that, the SR government must provide enough resources for the police and the judiciaries so that we can stop the violent acts of the rioters. And the SR government must also discharge its constitutional duty to legislate on Article 23 of the Basic Law to plug loopholes in the national security scenario, or RAM. Now, we have to be mindful about the war situation. The Europe and US have been trying to stage a propaganda campaign smearing Hong Kong, saying that the virus comes from Wuhan initially. And they said that this virus has spread from Wuhan to the rest of the world. And they query that our country is hiding the facts. And they also took the WHO to task, saying that they were biased towards China. They tried to incite the rest of the world to smear China. So such kind of act has been happening since the China was established as a country, and this kind of thought also has an impact on people who are not happy with our nation. Now, in the commentaries of the Western countries, we see that clearly that if the epidemic is over, the Western countries, well, in relation to social, economic, and cultural aspects, will attack China. So we can envisage that the trade disputes will go on, and there will be different kinds of technological, economic sanctions. And Hong Kong is the most internationalized city in China. And Europe, or the UK and the US, will be using Hong Kong as a chess piece to attack China. The situation is going to be severe. Now, after 6 months of social violence last year, overseas investors' confidence and desire to invest in Hong Kong has been dampened. So if we're going to see more violent acts in the future, even if Hong Kong has won the battle against COVID-19, such violent acts will further destroy Hong Kong. So Hong Kong will become totally uncompetitive in the future. So we can not further count on our underlying strengths. So can we have a bright future for our next generation? No. So for those who take part in these riots, they must think carefully. Now, I would like to quote the lyrics from a song by Mr. Sam Hui, so that we can encourage and advise those young people who are taking part in violence. So you are ignorant, but then you are narrow-minded, and you are bringing the Hong Kong down. So if they take part in such violent acts, they will create uncertainties in the society. So and what can they get? The new COVID-19 epidemic is doing damage to the global economy in Hong Kong, and the implications or the ramifications are much worse than that in SAR. The IMF envisaged that there will be a worldwide economic recession this year, and our economic activities have been hurt. And I think we are in a very bad economic situation, and the unemployment rate has risen to 4.2%, an unprecedented high in the past 9 years. When can the epidemic stop? This is unknown. As pointed out by the government, in face of the grave challenges, the SL government must avoid massive layoffs, or else we will be undermining demand, and that there will be a spiraling downwards of the economy. In the various spheres of economy, I hope that the TDC, Trade Development Council, can play a better role as a facilitator. Now, for the MICE industry in Hong Kong, whether we're talking about local and overseas exhibitions, well, we must strengthen the relevant promotion and liaison work. MICE, or conventions and exhibitions in Hong Kong, can bring benefits to catering, retail, and catering sectors. And worldwide, it can also help with the import and export and the logistics sectors in Hong Kong. This is a worldwide pandemic, and major export markets are seeing a decline in their demand. The external trade environment has worsened. In the first 2 months of this year, Hong Kong export commodities were valued, or there was a drop of 12%. And in the short term, I believe that the volume will remain low level. Well, we are entering a very bitter winter in the worldwide economy, and orders have been cancelled or frozen, and there's been a delay in the shipping and delivery schedules, and overseas buyers are asking for compensation. Hong Kong has a robust tertiary sector, and we must make the use of our advantages in MICE sector to boost Hong Kong's economy and help it rebound. I think this is an effective means to achieve this goal. So large, medium, and small and micro enterprises have to rely on a financing chain. So the FS in the budget has responded to our request. You would be launching out a 100% SME financing guarantee scheme. I hope that the SAO government can further strengthen support to enterprises. Apart from coming up with the relevant policies, banks and financial institutions should also chip in to help. And then after the epidemic is over, we hope that the economic activities can rebound, and there will be more flow of people. People will be negotiating business, and there will be more flow of goods and so on. If the healthcare system in some other countries is backward and they can't do test of the virus thoroughly, it is easy for the infection to come to Hong Kong again. We must prevent another outbreak of the epidemic. President, we are facing the global economic recession and also black violence incidents. I believe that the SAR government should put major efforts to stop violence, and we should let this the mentality of you burn down with us, and we should also overcome all sorts of difficulties.
Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Mr. President, the FS delivered his budget this year. In terms of livelihood, we don't see anything new, nothing new at all. Of course, if we say that the budget should be dismissed, of course it is not justified. Many citizens are eagerly waiting for the $10,000 to meet their ends meet. The unemployment rate has gone up to a high of 4.2%. It is expected that things would get worse in summer. Jobless rate may go up to 6%, a 10-year high. So $10,000 in the eyes of the jobless would be assistance in time. But I'm afraid this is not good enough. But still, it is of some help. Well, Mr. President, all sectors have been suffering from the economic hardship. Many workers are turning to me for help. They want to know what they can do. They are forced to take no-pay leave. They are unemployed or underemployed. Micro as well as enterprises and SMEs are turning to us for help, wondering if the landlords can reduce their rent. Otherwise, they have to quit because they don't have money for the rent. Now, of course, we have got the second round of the anti-epidemic fund. They had a lot of expectations, but in fact, many of them found themselves being missed by the AEF. Now, the government is saying that if you are short of cash, then why don't you apply for CSSA? Now, business prospect is poor. If the government is trying to act like a benefactor, I'm afraid even if we have more rounds of the AEF, we're not able to seek a way out, and we are not able to stimulate the economy, and we are not able to safeguard the jobs because the enterprises have failed and jobs cannot be safeguarded as a result. So I believe that the government must come up with the establishment of the unemployment relief scheme so as to make sure that people get help in terms of the income as a result of being forced to take no-pay leave. There are also citizens who are aged 65 and above, and they do not benefit from the ESS. The government should try hard to help the micro enterprises and SMEs to survive. The government will always say that it is a matter of prudent public finance, and so the government is slow to act. I think in the past, the government used to say that we need to save for the rainy days. We have got $1 trillion in the fiscal reserves. I think it is high time for us to be more relaxed in our requirements. We are in deep trouble if the government still say no to the call to spend more public money to help the citizens. What's the use of saving $1 trillion in our fiscal reserves? Now, we have been told that for the coming 5 years, we're going to see a fiscal deficit. Now, if the government can foresee a deficit in the next 5 years, then how come that the government would still want to have the Land Out Tomorrow vision being implemented? The FS also said that he's confident that he could pay for the $600 billion project. Why is the government so confident? We have had a lot of overrunning of the cost. It is a common scene. Say, for example, the XRL as well as the Sha Tin Central Link. They are white elephant projects. Why should we be asked to pay for such? What we have seen is that we always get this in the budgets, saying that we cannot count on the relief measures to overcome all the difficulties. But on this occasion, the government has come up with a different philosophy. And in fact, $120 billion in the form of one-off relief measures will be offered. It is 16.4% of our recurrent expenditure. This is unprecedented, a 4-year high in fact. But at the same time, when it comes to long-term measures, we do not see any ideas in them. Yes, we're supposed to get a new fiscal philosophy, but we don't actually see any new thinking. In terms of welfare, housing, etc., we do have long-term planning. The government would always rely on one-off measures in the form of subsidies, assistance, etc. Well, they are just sort of mitigatory in nature. Well, in fact, the government should have come up with something more massive to salvage the economy. When we started to see the epidemic outbreak in January, the government has always relied on the mainland to support and prop up our economy. And therefore, when we were caught by the epidemic onslaught, we are seeing a catastrophic consequence in our economy. Of course, we welcome a universal cash handout, but this cannot last and this cannot be repeated time and again. I think what the government is trying to do is that it doesn't want to get committed in terms of recurrent expenditure. It doesn't want to spend money on the livelihood of the people on a long-term basis. In other words, it is a lack of commitment towards the grassroots. We have asked the administration to reform the working family allowance as well as the CSSA schemes so that the elderly can apply on their own instead of having to be bundled together with the rest of the household and make the children declare that they are not supporting the elderly parents. When are the government officials willing to do this so that people can avoid having to fight for their survival? I do not see any determination on the part of the government to address this issue. When the FS delivered his budget in this chamber, he said that he hoped that the differences could be set aside so that there is room for us to resolve the conflicts so that we can take Hong Kong forward. But then if you would like to set aside the differences, for we to get this from the FS, it is laughable because in this budget, you see a lot of details that would only aggravate the inequality as well as the contradictions and confrontations. It is politically driven. On the face of it, the government is being generous, but in fact the government isn't. For the $10,000 universal cash payout, it is being bundled together with the request to increase funding for the police. We are being compelled to endorse a budget which is socially unjust. No, it is like asking people to pay a ransom. So it is politically motivated, a political operation. What worries us most is that we are asked to give 25% more to the police for the funding, so that come next year, the total will be as much as $25.7 billion, a peak that we haven't seen in the past. And in fact, we are going to get 2,543 more policemen. Now, the government would like to get more money to buy equipment, etc. In other words, will be suppressed. Our voice to get democracy and freedom will be suppressed. Now, how are we going to know how the money is to be spent? Well, in fact, we are told that there is this specialist equipment, and there are $600 million to be spent on stun guns and tear gas. There will be 6 armored personnel vehicles and 1 water cannon vehicle. All such will come out from this amount of money. Well, in fact, police brutality was prevalent before the epidemic. Last night, we marked the July 21st incident. Nobody was spared. Do you remember what was said here? It is said that I do not agree that the police has been impartial in its law enforcement. In other words, he admitted that the police have been selective in its law enforcement, in fact, instead of being fair and just. Of course, being selective in law enforcement may not always be wrong, because if you are selective when you pick out the triad elements to focus your resources and efforts on, is fine. Now, what happens is that when it comes to selective law enforcement, the police would pinpoint the young people, those who are clad in black, and there is abuse, and we get beaten up. So this is an abuse of police power, and yet the police turned a blind eye to that. Is it what is tantamount to, or what can be regarded as impartiality? Against such a background, can we still say yes to the request to give more money to the police? On the 27th of February, when the FS attended a radio program, he said that irrespective of the political background of lawmakers, even if lawmakers have different views concerning the police funding request, the Secretary for Security and the Commissioner of Police can explain how the money is to be spent, and lawmakers can move amendments. This is most ridiculous. Is there anyone in Hong Kong that doesn't know the following? That is, with the majority of the members here who are pro-establishment and with the liaison office supporting them, can we really operate freely? We are even urged not to vote against the budget or other funding requests. How can we force them to be more transparent and give us a full account in relation to their expenditure at our meetings? Now, recently, for our government, in particular, and including the CE, she's but a puppet, and many public officers are getting more and more like yes men. Now, she has taken the initiative to buckle under pressure. Now, for the Hong Kong Macau Affairs Office, as well as the liaison office, I think they are adding more powers to their portfolio, and they are encroaching upon our core values in Hong Kong. Well, since our handover, the most important point and the most important asset is one country, two systems, and a high degree of autonomy. But then this has been violated. Our government has been silenced, and the government chose to be chilled. In other words, the government has totally given up the power to govern Hong Kong. So, seeing what has happened, how can we and why should we still be granting money to this government to continue with its governance? Therefore, for this budget, I'm afraid I cannot support it. So I spoke. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Leung Chi-Chan. Thank you. The debate of the Appropriation Bill takes place in the context of the black-clad violence last year and COVID-19. Hong Kong's economy is in deep plight, and our unemployment rate has risen, and there is a lot of unrest from the people. The budget announced that $10,000 would be given out to every permanent Hong Kong resident who is an adult. This would help calm people's hearts, and this should be approved as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the opposition stood against the budget out of political reasons, and the police force. I urge the opposition camp not to stand against the people. They should side with us in approving the budget so that $10,000 can be given out as soon as possible. Today, I'd like to talk about elderly welfare. I'd like to offer a quick review or recap on elderly welfare in recent years. In 2012, elderly subsidies were introduced, and the subsidy level was about twice the amount of fruit money, and the requirements were more lenient than that of CSSA. The idea was to help the elderly so that they would not fall into poverty. As Hong Kong's population aging becomes more serious, a higher payment for old age allowance was introduced, and the revenue expenditure swelled from $15.3 billion in 2017 to 18 to $27 billion last year. But the problem of elderly poverty hasn't improved much. The Commission on Poverty announced that by 2018, the number of elderly persons in poverty did not drop. It remained at above 30%. The government explained that the old age allowance is merely one of the pillars suggested by the WHO, while Hong Kong's MPF regime can supplement its deficiencies. That way, retired elderly persons can enjoy stable income, but Hong Kong's situation is unique. Even though more than 75% of employees in Hong Kong have an MPF account, but with the high administrative fees of the MPF and the contribution percentage is only 5%, and with the long-standing problems with offsetting, the MPF could not exercise its intended function. Meanwhile, Hong Kong has to deal with population aging. And I believe population aging would only become more serious, leading to more complaints. It is time for the government to consider adjusting the current retirement benefits. I think 3 elements are crucial. It must be impartial and fair. The current asset and income limits under OAA has meant that a lot of people are not eligible for fruit money without any means testing. The age threshold is 70 and the amount is 50% less than OAA. So you are dividing up elderly people into different segments. So any reform must seek to unify the cash payments or subsidies. And you must instill trust in the public that they can rely on MPF money when they retire. Earlier this year, the Hong Kong Investment Fund Association published a study saying that only 10% of the respondents believed MPF money would be enough for retirement. As for the tax-deductible voluntary contributions, last year, 70% heard about it, but only 60% participated in the contributions. And the results showed a sad fact that with the MPF regime in place for 20 years, the net asset value amounted to $969.5 billion, covering 85% of the labor force, with nearly 3 million employees and the self-employed participating, and with 35,000 employees in the trade. At the end, all you have is something people do not want. And the profit is not guaranteed under MPF schemes. Under the COVID-19 and the global unrest in March, the average MPF return was minus 7%, and the cumulative loss in the first 3 months of the year was 10%. Personally, the MPF has good intentions, but the actual execution must be improved. In terms of the investment portfolios, investment manager fees, and flexibility for employees, all these must be improved. That way, employees can have trust in the MPF regime again, and they would be more willing to contribute to the MPF. That way, the MPF can serve its purpose as a retirement protection pillar. And under the current MPF regime, the employees and employers have roles, but not the government. Why has the government excluded itself from such an important regime? That way, how can you instill trust in employees? The government's role and function are very important. Government participation can help share some of the risks for employees. For elderly workers, PWDs, housewives, and the self-employed, they could all be included in the regime. And the government can take care of their retirement life. And retirement protection does not just amount to cash benefits. People who reach a particular age might start to have health problems. For those who just recover from surgeries or diseases, they might need personal care. And that is why personal health care services are equally important. Some people might say that these people can enter care homes in order to receive close attention. But the fact is, most elderly people do not like living in a care home. According to many studies, more than 80% of elderly people with deteriorating health would like to stay at home and a community they are familiar with. The government's policy of aging at home is certainly the right way to go and is in line with people's expectations. If that's the case, why has Hong Kong's community care services been lacking? The waiting times are very long. Many elderly people are taken care of by fellow elderly people, for example, old couples, and in some cases they would suffer till death. And one-to-one care services should be provided to elderly citizens. And in such a labor-intensive industry, waiting time is very long. It's as long as 1 year. Whereas home care service providers are mainly NGOs funded by the government. Elderly citizens must go through the government's assessment mechanism. And some elderly citizens would give up, and they would be taken care of by their spouses. Would the government reconsider the current approach of relying on NGOs to provide care services? Is this enough to tackle Hong Kong's aging population? In some overseas places, such as Japan and Germany, long-term care services have been introduced in the market. Capacity has expanded, and with competition, quality is ensured, and an insurance approach has been adopted. That way, care services could develop in a sustainable manner, and this is a triple win solution for service providers, the elderly, and the government. So shouldn't the government learn from the overseas experience? The DAB has been proposing the idea of a silver hair card, and that is a card for those aged between 60 and 64, providing various concessions. This is something we proposed last year. The definition of elderly is those aged above 65. Through this Silver Hair card, we hope to pave the way for more elderly benefits. The card can provide personalized concessions, healthcare, vouchers, social care services, etc. 10 years ago in Singapore, so long as the elderly citizens tap their cards at a road crossing, the green light would be automatically extended. Apparently, in some areas in Hong Kong, a pilot test was conducted, but there was no follow-on work. The card we proposed was accepted by the CE in January this year, but she did not fully adopt the idea. The card holder can enjoy $2 concessionary fares, even though the eventual functionality is somewhat different from our idea, but this is at least the first step. We hope the government can have this implemented very soon before enhancing the functionalities of the card. I speak in support of the budget. Thank you. The meeting is suspended till 2 p.m. Thank you.